Thank you all for coming tonight to Sensor Tower's very first inaugural Mobile Insights Hub, and extra special thanks to our friends at Zynga for providing this awesome space for our event. I'm Randy Nelson. I'm the head of Mobile Insights at Sensor Tower, and we are here tonight with kind of a packed schedule for you. We're going to start out the event tonight with talk on the state of the App Store by our product manager, Brian Koenig. We're going to follow that up with an excellent panel of speakers that we have, ASO experts in their own right, to discuss topics related to ASO, ASO Best Practices, localization, and the intersection of paid UA and ASO. That will be followed up with a Q&A session for the questions that you guys have from the panel discussion. And then we're going to wrap up the night with a networking hour. We invite you to stay, have some drinks, network, and have some one-on-one time with our panelists. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand you guys over to Brian Koenig, product manager at Sensor Tower, who's going to talk about the state of the App Store in 2016. So.
All right, thank you guys all for being here. As Randy said, I'm the product manager at Sensor Tower, and I work across our suite of intelligence products. And I started out on the software engineering side in console game development, and I don't think I could have ever predicted that this is where the industry as a whole was going. And one of my favorite aspects of working in our industry is how fast reality is changing. There's constantly new apps coming out. The consumers are changing the ways in how they use their phone, and they expect their phone to be able to do different things. It's a global market. Our customer base is getting wider and broader every day, and it's the socioeconomic swath is getting wider and wider and wider. And so it's really how do we find the consumers and the users of the phones that are the best customer for our products and get the most done. So yeah, I wanted to just take a few minutes tonight before the real experts get up here on the panel and talk about things to just go over some of the trends that we're thinking about at Sensor Tower. So we can start with one metric that I think we're all pretty familiar with, which is CPI, which is the cost per install. And a lot of user acquisition networks now are saying that this is sort of an outdated metric. You should really look at cost per loyal user, cost per monetizing user. But no matter how you slice it, at the end of the day, the cost of buying users or paying for users is going up and up. So this is an international average from Fixu, but I think we've all seen in our user acquisition struggles that CPI is going up. And so this really affects new game developers, especially when I was an indie developer, just getting people to play the games was a huge obstacle. And getting that first 10,000 users is getting more and more expensive. But this really affects all of us. If you look at some CPIs in countries like Australia or New Zealand, you're like, why is the cost twice as high? But then you realize that you're not the only person trying to soft launch your app in a market that sort of mirrors North America. And so it's really affecting all of us. If you're A/B testing your game economy, you want to get a decent sized chunk so that the answers you get are reflective of the market. And so, okay, as CPI is going up, we want to investigate other avenues. It's not just about paid user acquisition. And so through this change, App Store optimization and discoverability is sort of becoming a hot topic, and that's what our panel is going to talk about tonight. So CPIs are on the rise. That's nothing new, BK. How else can we look at some of the trends that are going on in the App Store? And so this is some analysis on the churn rates in the top 25 in the iOS App Store. And so it's pretty noisy, but it's an indicator of how often the top 25 apps changed. And so if we look back at 2012 on the left-hand side of the graph, things were really volatile. The top 25 was mostly games. What were people doing on their phone other than making phone calls? They were playing games. It started out years ago with Snake and some of those other simple games. That gaming, our phones are getting more advanced, the screens are big and beautiful, we're going to play games. But what you saw was that games were rising really, really quickly up the grossing charts, and then sort of, players would lose interest, they'd peter out, they'd drop out, and so there were only really a few that stuck around. But now, near the far right-hand side, coming closer to today, the top 25 is sort of becoming fixed. We're seeing the big guys, whether it's Supercell or Zynga on the game side, or you have traditional media like HBO and Netflix even, that are really solidifying their grip. Transit apps like Uber and Lyft. Those are the apps that are making up the top 25, and they're really tightening their grip there. So we can look at this from another angle. We can look at it from how revenue is split between the haves and the have-nots, or really the top 1%. And so our data science team did some great analysis and looked at the share of the US iOS App Store purchases due to the top 1%. And 4 years ago, in 2012, it was around 80%. And so sure, the top 1% certainly were taking a big share of the pie, but nowhere near the sort of dominance that we're seeing. And what's causing this? If you're in the top 1%, you have the revenue to reinvest in live ops, in continuous development, in continuous user acquisition, and as the market is maturing, we as an industry are getting better and better at the analytics side of things and retaining users. So one other way to look at this data is okay, well, right, but the market's growing, and so a rising tide lifts all boats, and that's certainly true. But what we want to look at is the tide rising some boats higher or faster than others? And so if you rank the iOS App Store by grossing ranking, so gross revenue, and we picked the 50th ranked app, the 1500th ranked app, the 5000th ranked app, and the 10,000th ranked app, and as you can see, so one way to interpret this is if you have the 50th ranked app in 2016, you're making over 6 times as much a day as you were if you were the 50th ranked app in July of 2012. And okay, well, what if I'm not a big dog? What if, I have a dev team of 8 people and we get a few thousand downloads a day? Well, the rank 1500 still saw a 3x increase, which in 4 years is pretty incredible. But this does sort of reflect that the developers that are advanced and that are really good at retention, really good at monetizing, they've just kept getting better and better. And so you might look at this and you might say, okay, well, this is really doom and gloom, and I didn't come here tonight to get sad, but it's really not doom and gloom. This is we can just look at probably one of the highest level metrics there is, and this is just worldwide iOS App Store revenue over time. And you guys have probably seen this slide a million times, but it really is incredible to look over the past 4 years, and this is monthly revenue. So the App Store now is around $1.4 billion a month in revenue. So the pie is getting a lot bigger. And so the market's changing. More people are having phones. The people that have phones are using their phones in different ways, and their purchase patterns are changing. I think we're going to see the erosion of this sort of price ceiling where people put mobile in a different category. I have HBO Now, and I also can watch HBO Now on my iPhone or my Android device. And so this sort of divide between what's mobile and what's not mobile is crumbling. And so there's more users than ever. People are using their phone more per day than ever, and they're generating more revenue than ever. And so really there's more opportunity than ever. And it's how do we get our apps, our products in the hands of the people that would be most interested and best served by those, and that's naturally going to be good for our businesses. And so how do we go about doing that in the current market? And that's hopefully what our panel is going to talk about tonight. So again, thanks for coming. I'd like to turn it over to the experts on the panel.
All right, thanks again for coming tonight, guys. My name is Wes McCabe. I work on product marketing at Sensor Tower, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight. Love to introduce our great panelists up here. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of them myself. Right here we have Spiros. He's the director of growth at SEGA. He does everything from user acquisition to app store optimization. Jessica Grant, lead UA manager at Zynga. Dan Held. He is the ASO manager at Uber, and we have Ashley Higgins on the end there, mobile product manager at Reddit. I want to start off with just each of them giving a little bit more of a bio on what they're currently working on in their respective role. Start with you.
Hi, guys. Is it working? Okay, now it's working. So, hi, thanks for coming, missing the Warriors game. So, I've been at SEGA for almost 3 years now. I do the ASO stuff, cross-promo, UA, recently ad monetization. Right now on ASO, we're focusing a lot on moving the conversion numbers, as well as looking into how we can take advantage of all the changes that Apple is doing with their search algorithms. On the Google side, which is pretty different, I feel like I'm in 08, where you were trying to optimize for the, for the SEO, not ASO. So happy to talk about those things.
Hi, I'm Jessica. So my main focus right now, I've been at Zynga about 1.5 years, and I work very closely on leading all the user acquisition for our slots titles and our match 3 titles, from soft launch to legacy games on user acquisition. We work very closely with our central teams and studios to make sure, we're seeing with the increasing costs that ASO is becoming more and more prominently important for us, and it's a huge sort of focus for us to get right.
Hi, I'm Dan Held, and I head up App Store Optimization for Uber. ASO at Uber, my focus at Uber is I focus on iOS, Android, rider, driver. So we have an Uber partner app on Android, which is for our driver partners, and Uber Eats. So, basically heading up, improving search discoverability, improving conversion rate, a little bit of developer relations with the app stores, and like channel optimization, like Twitter app cards or smart banners.
I'm Ashley Higgins. I work at Reddit. I'm the mobile product manager there, which means I work on both the product development of the iOS and Android apps, which just came out about a month ago, as well as how we get that app in the hands of our users. So that includes cross-promotion, app store optimization, platform relationships with the Apple and Google, and anything else we can think of.
Awesome, thank you guys. So tonight we've divided this into 3 sections. The first section is going to be ASO Best Practices. So for people in the room that are new to ASO, this is sort of ASO 101, the do's and don'ts. So let's start off here. We can start with you, Dan. What is the most common ASO mistake you see on the App Store? What's something that people can leave here today and maybe make a change tomorrow with their App Store listing?
So are we talking about the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store?
Your pick.
Either. Well, let's pick the Apple App Store. So with the Apple App Store, before Uber, I did a lot of App Store optimization consulting, and I saw keywords in the title repeated quite often in the keyword slot. I think that's like a really big mistake where you waste keyword, you waste basically the available characters in your keyword slot. And I think a lot of people believe that keyword repetition on iOS matters, and from what I understand, it doesn't. So keyword repetition and using keywords in the keyword slot that are already in your title basically doesn't optimize. It's not well optimized to maximize your available keywords that you can use.
Great. Anyone else on ASO mistakes?
I'll do one. I think people trying to use keywords that they have no chance of ranking for ever. It's much better, I think, to pick keywords that might be long tail, but that you're going to get a high ranking for versus, trying to rank for funny or pics when, you don't get that many installs. So.
Great. All right, so that's actually a great transition into this question. So when you submit your keywords to Apple, you're submitting a list separated by commas, and they're single words. But when you're doing your research, the reality is that people search on their phone, they may be searching a phrase. So when you're doing your keyword research, how do you think about those long tail keywords or accounting for the phrases that people might be searching for?
I'll do a little bit. We don't really use phrases currently, but we do a lot of long-tail keywords that are brand specific. So Reddit has some words that only mean anything on Reddit, like upvote and downvote and subreddit, which obviously we'll rank for. And so to start, since we just launched the app a month ago, we're kind of starting there and then dipping our toe into the waters of pushing for higher trafficked keywords as we get more of that authority from high ratings and install volume.
I was just saying a good thing to think about is like how your customer searches versus, and I know this is kind of like a fault of marketers sometimes to think that everybody searches the same way as we do because we know all the keywords and the brand terms, and yes, everyone searches match 3. Nobody searches match 3. It's not a public keyword. So sort of understanding how your user is going to search and then picking those important parts of those phrases that can be used in the keyword search.
Yeah, I mean, we try to go for games that have titles that are essentially 2-3 words together. So we try to go for the combination of of 2 keywords that together probably we're not going to rank, but those 2 of them together or 3 of them together we are going to rank, and it does have some significant traffic. So we try to do that. I think we have another question about things that are trending, right? So
Yeah, I mean, you can address that now. If you'd like.
We often try to go for things that for keywords that we think are going to be trending. For example, one successful case was when we ranked for the Fast and the Furious when the movie came out for an app that was like for Crazy Taxi. We're thinking of doing some political stuff now, like just putting like Trump and like things like this. See how that works. So if anything is trending that people are not really looking, we are trying to get it. The other interesting thing is we've noticed that like there's a lot of famous actors and famous soccer players that are not being ranked at all because they don't have an app. So we try those things sometimes. Yeah.
I mean, I think we've covered it pretty well, but we obviously have keyword phrases like taxi service and like taxi, relevant to like different geographic areas. So we don't look at very long phrases. It's typically 1 to 2 words. But yeah, it's something that we definitely look at.
Great, thank you. So going back to the title, we see these app titles getting longer and longer. A lot of times that's done with sort of the name of the app and then a dash or a colon and then a tagline. It's maybe evident to some of you guys, but why are publishers doing that? Why is the title 255 characters? And what can people be benefiting from having longer titles?
I can take this. So the title for any app is important in your keyword ranking, but using all of the 255 characters is probably not a good idea. From a user acquisition point, on some of our sources, like the app title gets pulled into our ads, and when you have 255 characters of like slots, best, casino, fun, free, pokies, it does not look good. So you kind of want to make sure you get a balance and that you have the most important keywords as part of your title, but don't keyword stuff. And you will be punished by the app stores in some places. Apple will deny your app if you're putting like as many keywords into the name as possible that don't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, Apple gives you 255 characters. Keywords in the title are weighted really heavily. So obviously app developers are going to take advantage of that. I think for bigger companies that are like have a very, very strong brand like Uber and other companies out there, it's hard to maximize keywords in the title without kind of diluting your brand image. So I think for indie developers, it's a pretty valuable tool they can use to improve search discoverability. Keywords in the title are weighted much heavier than keywords in the keyword slot, so it's advantageous to use that to your advantage.
Awesome, thank you guys. Yeah, from what we've seen, it's definitely this fine line of, using the space but not getting too aggressive and spammy with it. All right, so, we've got some very, established brands up here, Uber, Reddit, and, some people might think that, discoverability might not be an issue. Yet you guys have full-time dedicated positions to ASO. So in what ways can ASO help, these already established brands? You guys touched on this in the very beginning, but maybe a little bit more, Dan, to like what you're working on particularly.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people view ASO as just improving search discoverability, putting those keywords in your title, ranking high for relevant keywords. Some people might consider App Store optimization as also getting featured in the App Store or ranking high for their category. But I think the App Store optimization stack, we look at that at Uber in kind of a holistic perspective. So for me, we already have quite a few views. So my primary what I do on a day-to-day basis is I primarily focus on conversion rate optimization, configuring the App Store metadata to improve conversion. For me, that's the biggest lever I can press at the moment. As an established brand like Uber, we already have a lot of traffic coming to our App Store page. So improving conversion rate there makes the most sense for us, or it's the best use of my time. For like a less established brand, improving your discoverability makes the most sense.
Do you want to go? I think another benefit to being an established brand is you have the advantage of people already knowing who you are and potentially having like decent volume to play with. And so I think in that way you can find like tangential keywords that you can pull people in who may not have ever heard of your brand. So in my case, Reddit obviously spans pretty much every possible thing that you could be interested in. But let's say we wanted to be ranking for like sports or March Madness or something. We could probably rank for those things, and then people will find their way into Reddit, and it will end up being a good thing in the end. So I think established brands can sort of play around with some of their more tangential categories that way.
So we have some games that have that drive a lot of downloads and a lot of views, and then we have some games that don't really drive a lot of views. From the analysis we've done, when you're doing ASO optimizations for games that do have a lot of views, the effect is actually measurable. So you can actually increase the ranking on the store thanks to ASO. We found that if you have a game that is getting very few downloads, then it's probably a waste of your time doing ASO because the download number you're getting, especially on the App Store, is so small that it won't make a difference. So you would probably want to focus more on driving people to the store if you have a small app that's not getting a lot of downloads already, and then start focusing on ASO.
Yeah, for us it's a little different because Zynga, although known in the industry, probably the games themselves, I mean, I've talked to a lot of players, and Zynga, the company, is people like, oh, words, but they don't know that Zynga makes it until you talk to them. So we have tied in a lot of established, well-known brands, movie titles, things like that into our games, and that definitely can help drive search and downloads. The App Store, sort of the optimization side of it, is we have to make sure that the app that they see when they search for those IPs is relevant to them and that they're interested into downloading and playing it. So for us, it's like using partnerships of IPs to do that.
So we've talked a lot about ASO in terms of keywords and the metadata that you're submitting to iTunes Connect. ASO has also become this broad field that includes everything on your App Store listing. So one question we hear a lot is how do ratings and reviews, some of these other elements on your App Store page, factor into your ASO strategy?
I think that we know that ratings, even just personally, that there's a social proof element to the ratings on the App Store page. So when you go to an App Store page and it has good ratings, you're more likely to convert to an install. Or perhaps if it has a very low rating, you might change your mind and decide, actually, I'll just let that one bake for a little longer before I bother downloading it. So I think sort of in the interest of optimizing for conversion rates, ratings are one of the easier things that you can do. Certainly when we put in we launched without an app rating request, and ended up with like a 2-star rating, because you're basically just inviting people who want to complain to go out of their way and rate you. And then as soon as we put in the app rating request, within a day, we were at 4.5 stars. It was just like instant, super easy. And then people are more likely to see that rating and install the app.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely say for conversion rate, ratings are important. For ranking, not so important. But it can assist you in your ranking because it assists in increasing your downloads. Especially important when you're launching a new app. People haven't heard of it before, and they're going to the page, and if they see 2 stars or 1 star, then you're not likely to convert that user. But also important to alert you to what's going on with your game. So if you put a new release out and then you get a whole bunch of 1 stars, then maybe there's something you need to quickly address and put a hot fix in and fix it to help boost your ratings again.
Yeah, for us in Japan, it plays quite a big role because I feel like people are much more. I guess Apple is not that stringent on the rules of how you can manipulate ratings and reviews there. Here in the West, unfortunately, we can't do much. I would probably. If I was in a small company that kind of flies under the radar, I would probably do quite a lot of things, trying to like mess ratings and reviews. So that's my advice. If you guys are not,
I can say as a large company that doesn't work. We get caught.
Yeah. For like SEGA, we would get caught, but some of you may not.
Thanks, Spiros. Okay, so that concludes part 1. We have a lot of time at the end for Q&A, so this phase 2 is going to be localization. So, once you're up and running in the U.S. and you're going to be growing your app abroad, what are some ways you can do that? So the first question, pretty broad here. What does the localization process look like for you?
I'll take this one first. So what's nice about Uber is that we have boots on the ground in every city that we're located in. So our process begins in a centralized fashion where we use professional translation services to translate our English text into other languages. And then we have our local city teams verify that translation. So in essence, we have 2 translations done. We have a translation and then we have it verified. So we're one of the few companies that has that option available to verify the translations, but it's been pretty robust so far.
So for games, it's a little different. I think like if you're an e-commerce site or a travel site, things like that, localization, in-app localization is incredibly important. A lot of our games are English only once you get into the app. But we still, on the keyword side and the naming side, it's important to use localized lingo language on the countries that we are supporting. So for us, it's more of a basis of making sure that the search keywords that we use are relevant to the countries that we're and the language, because ASO App Store is language specific and not country specific. So you have to deal with that as well.
Cool. Yeah, we use the tool from Sensor Tower, and then we have our internal team at SEGA Europe check the localization. So we're lucky that we have some people, that speak Spanish, German, French, a bunch of different languages over there that can check it for us. So that's that's the process, and we. If it's a big title like Sony, we'll always localize. If it's small titles, we sometimes don't localize at all.
Awesome. Ashley, I have a question for you. This is one we touched on a little bit earlier. But are you guys adjusting keywords, for seasonal trends? We talked about the idea of like trending topics on the App Store. What are you guys doing there?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I sort of stole this idea from when I was at SEGA and was working with Spiros. So, yes, we use seasonal trends and trending topics. So you can almost plot out a calendar of like, here are the, holidays that are going to be important, the sporting events, the sort of things that, people are going to be going into the app and searching for. And we kind of try to align those with our update cycles. So it's like here are the timing. Here's the timing we're going to use for these different keywords, and usually you can get a decent bump from it, albeit short-lived.
Awesome, thanks. So, again, going back to the title, so we're seeing apps, localize their metadata, their description, and of course their title. But we'll also see more and more of a trend of them keeping their title in English as well. Should people be doing this? Is there a benefit there? What are your guys' opinions on this?
I think from the gaming point of view, it really depends on your game and your brand and how large it is. It's, if you build your brand up like Clash of Clans or Words with Friends, like this is known everywhere. So you want to make sure you maintain that brand integrity, but still have localized title keywords so that it will help when somebody's searching in that language to come up.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the same sentiment where if it's a really strong brand, you want to keep that original language as the brand name. I think like in America, like a lot of times, like French, if there's like a French restaurant, they'll keep the original, the name of, like La Filet or La Madeleine or something, because it's, in the US, we think it's fancy.
Awesome. So, we've talked a little bit about the localization process. Does anything change when you're doing this for Google Play or the App Store in terms of what you're submitting or how you're getting like your assets ready for the stores?
It's the same for us. In terms of process, it's the same.
Yeah, and process for us is the same. Slightly different localization abilities, but yes, same.
While the localization process is the same, the Apple App Store used to take between like 7 and 9 days to review and approve an app. Now that's come down to like 1 day, so it's almost identical now. We used to have a different release schedule set up for iOS and Android, and now we can be much more in sync due to that reduced review time.
Yeah, similarly, we try to do, this isn't localization specific, but we try to do the testing on Google Play because the review times are so much faster and you can submit new updates whenever you want. They're basically up immediately. And then sometimes we can take those learnings and apply them over to the App Store side.
Great. So our final section here is on paid user acquisition and sort of how that works with ASO. So this is a meaty one. I want to talk about, when you're launching an app, how do you think about, all these pieces featuring paid user acquisition, maybe even social and ASO working together? What does that sort of launch go-to-market strategy look like?
I suppose as the UA person here, all of them sort of tie together. If you have featuring an ASO, your paid user acquisition is going to be that much cheaper. You can get that many more downloads and users into the game, the better everything is working together. So we obviously work very closely with both Apple and with Google to make sure, we have the most advantage in terms of any featuring or releases that we do. And ASO, the better the App Store itself is converting users, is extremely important to us. When we launch an app, we have, obviously a plan in place of like the most important regions for us, what we expect in terms of, downloads over time, expected performance, things like that. And obviously we move those metrics and move our targets based on what we see initially very quickly.
From our side, if we know we're gonna get featured or we think we're gonna get a good featuring, then we're not gonna do any paid UA and, while that featuring is running. I've found that when you are being featured, spending money on UA is probably a waste. You can just keep the money and spend it right after the featuring is gonna end. The only caveat to that is when I think that I might be going. Perhaps I would do a burst just to help the featuring. Sometimes I don't even need that. I do plan ASO and featuring together. So for ASO, when we are getting featured, we're gonna first go with really tough to get keywords. So keywords that have a lot of traffic but high difficulty, and then have a plan to do an update of the game 2 weeks right after the hard launch, and reduce the keywords to keywords that are a little bit easier for us to rank, because we lose the download volume, so we need to plan for that. So we plan the ASO and the featuring together, but the paid UA, my strategy is not to pay when I'm getting featured.
I work with our performance marketing team, but I think like getting featured is better than not getting featured. Being in a prominent position for a feature makes it like best new apps. That's a really great spot to be in. Mm-hmm. So I think like, with like the launch of Uber Eats, or the launch of like a new service in a country, like say UberX in like a different country, timing those, timing features with product launches or timing paid user acquisition strategies is probably advantageous, as you can take advantage of how the App Store algorithm works in terms of download velocity. So you can time those and get a little bit of a boost in terms of top free app ranking by optimizing your featured pay UA and ASO strategies.
I mean, we just did the one launch campaign so far, and frankly, it was all cylinders firing. So, I think we were mostly focused on making sure we were pretty certain that we were going to get a ton of volume to the App Store page from featuring, from our own cross promotion from the website and things like that. So it's more a question of, once they land on the page, how can we make sure that as many of them as possible get through the flow and actually install? And so I think from that perspective, ASO is actually probably one of our most important considerations.
One follow-up I have for you guys, just talking about featuring, for folks in the audience that maybe haven't been featured that are sort of going after that, are there things that a developer can do to get the attention of Apple, or the things that the Apple review team is looking for, like universal links? Or what are some tips you would give to people looking to get a feature, secure a feature?
I think it can be tough for companies that don't have. I think everyone up here works for a brand that's already pretty well established and known, so it's a little easier to get the attention of the App Store, I think. But I know from if you are a smaller company, one of the things that they're looking for, particularly as new OSs are coming out, is who's going to highlight the features that we're developing right now that are going to be like the next wave of support. So way back when like the watch first came out, like if you have watch support for your app, that was a big deal, and they were going to look kindly upon that. Sometimes bigger companies don't move that quickly, and so you have the benefit of being able to be that first mover on that, whereas like we might be a little more behind because we're too busy working, months in advance on things.
Another important thing is to get in front of the publisher team at Apple and Google. So they have the managers of the marketing team, but going through them and talking to the people that actually make the choices are important. And then you want to be telling them a story. So you want to start like 6 months earlier before before your hard launch, and tell them, hey, this is our idea, and then giving them updates every month. Try to like find ways to get meetings in person with them. And then you also want to prepare a marketing plan to show them that you're planning to support the app, and that's important for the first party because they care about driving downloads on the store, right? So if you're showing to them that you're committed and you're going to support it, and you present a thorough marketing plan, that increases your chances for getting featured.
Yeah, I'd second that definitely, and especially like if you want to get featured on Google, like making sure that you include like their other platforms in your marketing plan, YouTube, their search, their AdMob platforms, they react very positively when you talk about including their other platforms there.
Awesome.
Can I add one
Yeah.
thing in? I think also, like, to Spiros' point about getting in front of them early, a lot of the time it's a relationship management thing. And so if you can make them feel involved in the process, sometimes they're very opinionated about the way the app should be or how it should behave or even like how a UI element looks. And to the extent that you're able to give them some of the stuff they're asking for, then they feel invested in the development process and they're more likely to go to bat for you when it comes time for editorial.
Yeah, and then they've changed over the past 2 years, so they're way more open to talking to developers. It's just easier to get to at least the marketing people, both on Google and Apple, and talk to them. So I think that just reaching out to those people and figuring out who they are and just emailing them and meeting them, that would help quite a bit.
So another thing I want to talk about tonight is looking at retention rates. So it's not just about getting users to download your app, but getting them back into your app on a daily basis. So how do retention rates compare through these two channels, this paid acquisition channel and then your organic sort of ASO users?
I think it also depends on, if featuring is a huge thing. If you get featuring, it's great. You get a huge number of downloads, but you get also a huge number of like one-time opens. So for that period of time, you may actually see a pretty large drop in your retention, whereas your paid users will tend to be of higher value. Once that's gone and you're just regular ASOs bringing in users, regular search terms, then you can see comparable or even better user engagement from your users coming in through organically. But the featuring does tend to hurt that a little bit.
So on our side, we benchmark our UA against the organic users. So by default, they have to be as good or better than organic. So I guess it's given that UA, you can do stuff to affect the quality. I feel like that's our benchmark. If they're not doing as well, then we'll cut them. So I guess our plan is to be at least as good as the paid guys have to be as good as the organic.
Yeah, for us, it's we don't do paid UA. I don't think we have any plans to in the short term because we have a massive user base as it is. But a lot of our stuff is, so what we're comparing are retention rates from cross-promotion from our existing properties into the app versus organics. And organics perform more poorly in our case, mostly because they're finding the Reddit app through the chart rankings mostly through chart rankings, honestly, and so they're downloading the app without really knowing what it is, and we probably don't optimize well enough for introducing what Reddit is to a cold user, and so we probably see at least a 25% drop in retention from those users versus cross-promoted users from our existing Reddit properties who already know what to expect and how to use the app.
I think like with organic and paid conversion rates, obviously, or retention rates, there's obviously going to be a quite a bit difference in quality. You have people that are searching for your product and find it versus people that you're trying to convince or users that you're trying to convince to install your app. I can't really delve too deep into the specifics, but yeah, there's definitely a difference.
Okay, so a user has landed on your page, they're checking out your screenshots, and they're going to make that decision to download your app. So what are some ways you can improve conversion rates in your mobile marketing funnel? Starting at the top, what are some of the things that you guys, some of the tests and some of the things that you've seen work?
I think the top ones would be obviously screenshots, app name and icon. Video doing very well in terms of like first placement screenshot. Users tend to play, if they play the video, then get a little bit more of idea of what your app or your game is about, a little more willing to download it and then be engaged because they're not just downloading it and saying, I'll check it out. They've actually researched it a little bit. So those three things would definitely be the most important.
Companies like StoreMaven and SplitMetrics, which provide A/B testing tools for App Store metadata, they have some really good best practices in terms of, what can you optimize to improve conversion. I would say again, like screenshots are definitely like the number one thing you can change to improve conversion rates. If you're a less known developer or app publisher, app icon, and the app icon reflects a lot. You could reflect a lot more of the value of the product or like what the product does in the app icon. Companies, a more well-established brand can't do that, and so I think lesser known publishers should take advantage of that.
We've been using the Google Play built-in experiment kind of function within the dev console, and I found it really useful to run multiple experiments at any given time. It's free and it's easy, and within a couple days you can get instant results on things like what is the best short description that's going to work, that 80 character snippet that's going to explain what the app is to users who don't know. The feature graphic that sits at the top on Google Play is especially interesting to play around with. We don't have as much flexibility with changing the icon because it's sort of the logo of Reddit, and there's not a lot we can do to play around with it. So we have to make up for that by trying to be creative with screenshots and feature graphics and the copy we use.
Recently, we've been trying to get featured pages for some of our apps. So if you can get that, try to get it. A way to convince Apple to do it is running a test on your own, and then sending them the data and telling them, "Hey, converts better." And then most of the time they will do it. They will make the change because they want to help you get as many downloads as possible. The other thing that we've noticed recently on our test is, Dan mentioned StoreMaven. They also, they break down the users to, the users that convert immediately and the users that go around and they're the explorers. So we try to reduce the number of explorers on the store as much as possible. One way we found that you can do that is by keeping the store consistent. So don't if you have a top banner and an icon that are not really similar, or you have screenshots that are kind of weird, try not to do that, because you want the user to go to the store, immediately figure out what he does, and only click the install button. So trying to get people to just click the install button, nothing else, is what we're trying to optimize now.
So Dan, you mentioned StoreMaven, I think it was SplitMetrics. Other than Sensor Tower, what are some of the other services and providers that help you guys do your job?
Well, we obviously love Sensor Tower.
Thank you.
In terms of keyword optimization, of course we take, I guess from a more holistic perspective, we've got Sensor Tower, App Annie is obviously a really popular provider out there. StoreMaven, SplitMetrics, we've definitely taken a look at. There's other companies like GummyCube. I think in terms of a day-to-day, what product am I using most often? It's probably Sensor Tower. I know this is a Sensor Tower meetup, but honestly, I'm in it every day. So.
Yeah, just on Dan's, those three probably. For us, Sensor Tower, GummyCube, especially for localization keywords, and StoreMaven for testing, for split testing, as well as the Google App Store for A/B testing there.
Yeah, we use StoreMaven, Sensor Tower, and some tools we built in-house.
What about on the UA side? Are there any agencies, or is that private?
There's so many.
Not that we use.
Okay. Ashley, did you have anything on the end there?
No.
Okay.
I would say the Google Play Developer Console, they've recently improved it to where you can run 5 experiments at the same time, which is really cool because you could only run one at a time before. And since we have so many different localizations, that was kind of rough. So that was really exciting. That was kind of a whole, and then they used to just have organic rates, or they used to have conversion rates per channel. And now they have conversion rates per country. So that was a really big leap forward in terms of tools that for us that we can use in the developer console to help improve conversion rates.
All right, so we definitely want this conversation to continue. This is the Q&A session. We hope you guys have some questions. We're going to have a mic runner because we are taking footage in the back. So does anyone have any questions to kick us off? Yeah, why don't we go just right here? Yeah, if we could borrow one mic, we'll pass up here.
Hello. Hi. How do you guys measure your keyword performance? Because Apple isn't very good on giving you analytics specific for keywords. You can't say, okay, this keyword is driving this many downloads. How do you guys think of it? And how do you know, what is your benchmark to figure out, okay, what's not performing and what are we going to swap out? Does that make sense?
Again, using a tool like Sensor Tower, we can estimate estimate traffic for different keywords. I think having like a well-established baseline helps you see the difference. So when you plan out your keyword strategy and you implement new keywords, having a good baseline to measure from can help you measure that performance of that new keyword that you're trying out.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good baseline of what our install volume is on a normal day, and we also know like what we're ranking for on any of our current keywords. And so usually I'm looking for weak performers, or if there are no weak performers, then I'm trying to figure out like how I can one-up myself and go to the next level. And that's a little bit of trial and error. I do like the like, I don't know what it's called, but there's some Sensor Tower thing that like predicts your likelihood of being in the top 10. And so we'll use that as like a little bit of a gut check first, and then sometimes just take the leap and see what happens, and then you just kind of have to play with it that way.
Your keywords, not predicting, but you say your keywords are live. Do you do it based on like what number you're ranking for?
Yeah.
As a benchmark? That's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of metrics there that we can take a look at to inform us like how much volume a certain keyword is getting, but certainly ranking number 1, 2, or 3, 4, 5 for that is going to be a good thing.
And I suppose also looking at if it's a highly competitive keyword or not. If it's one that's pretty unique to you, then you should be on the top. So looking at that side as well.
If you want, you can also like try to, there's some services now that help you boost a keyword. If you think a keyword is really important, you can try boost it and then see the effect. So we try that and see like if it made any change on the download while keeping everything else constant. So yeah, I mean, that's it.
Hey, I was curious if you guys have been able to kind of crack the code on ads on Google Play Store, like either your competitors doing it, like the impact you've understood from it, or being able to take advantage of the ads that show up through AdWords.
Yeah, I can do that. It's definitely good to do this. Google doesn't currently split out mobile search to App Store search, so you have to kind of go all in. But it definitely has an impact, especially when you're bidding against competitors or high-value keywords and you have your ad above, your competitor that's been there. You've got a much higher likelihood of getting that download. And we see our search on Google perform extremely well. So it's definitely something that I would do.
Yeah, I've seen it work better on Google, not well on, if you run AdWords on iOS, it just doesn't work that well. And then, and unfortunately they don't split out the store part, so it works, but I don't know what's the part that's working really.
Hi, thanks for taking time out. I'm curious what percentage of your users come by searching for the title of your app given your established brands, and what percentage are coming without the title on the App Store search, and how do they convert?
You talking like non-brand versus brand search? Yeah, unfortunately the app stores don't provide us with that information. You could probably assume a branded search is going to convert at a higher rate than a non-branded search. But without any metrics behind that, it's hard for us to quantify that other than looking at web search. But that's not, it's an okay proxy for App Store search, but it's still not, I think, apples to apples comparison.
I mean, I would say the only kind of comparison you can get is if you are on paid search. So if you have your branded keywords on paid search and your non-branded keywords, you can kind of make a jump over and say that this is going to have a similar effect in the App Store. But yeah, there's no real way to test that fully.
So if you're following a strategy like Ashley's, you talked a lot about using long-tail keywords to kind of boost initial traffic and initial views. At what threshold do you decide to move on to something like conversion optimization and start moving into perhaps punching up on the keywords? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for us, like if I'm number one for all of my keywords, but the traffic volume for those keywords is low, then I'm punching below my weight, basically. So I should be trying to make that leap up forward. And I think you just have to be willing to potentially take a dip in some cases, because you might overshoot it, and then you end up not ranking for any of those things, and now all of a sudden you just went from being number one in all your keywords to being like number 100, and now you're not getting any organic search traffic. So like I said, it's a little bit of trial and error, but you can usually get a pretty good indication based on the sort of your current ranking versus like the traffic possibility for that keyword.
And I also recommend that you keep a keyword bank that's relevant to your app, and then every time you want to make changes, you revisit the keyword bank and see which are the keywords that are like a little bit higher in terms of traffic than the ones that you have. So that just makes it easier to make the changes. We found that that's pretty helpful for us.
Yeah, we have something similar. It's like a wish list almost of like, when we get to this point, these are the words we're like ultimately trying to work toward. And so we're just like trying to continuously go up that ladder until we get there.
I noticed all of you guys have a custom background on the App Store. Any idea, any advice on how to get it? Is it like a reward from Apple? What do you guys think?
I mean, I think Spiros touched on this. It's your relationship with the App Store, obviously. And Spiros mentioned that if you do a test outside of it, where it's like a Store Maven, where you can build your an App Store yourself in there and provide those results to convince them, that may help you along the way. But it is obviously a partnership with the App Store itself.
Yeah, like you should like try. It's really a BD job. You can take them out for dinner and stuff like that. Go ahead and do it. They're like normal people like us. So all those things seem to work.
Yeah, I think it's either a relationship thing, or in some cases I think it's just like retroactive. The App Store wants to be right about their bets, and so if they bet on you as a featured thing and then you end up getting a ton of installs, like in our case, we hadn't tried to get a custom background. They approached us and said, hey, do a custom background. We're like, great, that's really cool. But it was only because we got featured and we did really well. And so then they kind of wanted to throw us some love, I think. So I'm not sure. I don't have a strategy for it.
One thing that you need to be cognizant is that just because usually the designer at Apple will make the decision on how it will look like. But that's also something that you could change if you can back it with data. So sometimes they might make a choice that you're not that happy about. So you should still consider talking to them because they would be open to it.
Did they design yours? They don't design ours.
I had a question about strategies for driving installs for languages that Apple doesn't support. So there's lots of countries with unique languages that Apple's kind of looked over, but we have an opportunity to get installs. So what are some strategies to do that?
Well, so how apps are distributed is really funky. So apps are distributed by country and then localized by language. So for example, you have like English US, but you can't create like a localized app store page for just the United States. It's English US. But there's also like on Google Play, there's Spanish US. So sometimes there's a weird gap. So the App Store page that's displayed for you when you go to an App Store page, so for like Uber, is based on your device's localization settings. And sometimes there's like this weird gap. So English India is a good example, whereas English India is an available localization setting on your iPhone. There is no English India localization for the App Store. So there's no specific page you could localize for them.
I noticed like Poland is not supported, but my phone supports it, but there's no
Exactly.
App Store presence.
Yeah, the localization settings in your device have that as an available option, but there's no App Store page option for that. There is a gap. I think you could lobby Apple or Google and say, hey, there's a gap here, and I think the product that we've built, really needs, we need a localized page for this language. And I think they'd be open to it. I mean, they've already made a localization setting on the device for that language. Yeah, I think they're open to that. It's a weird implementation, and so right now there is a gap, and the best chance you have is just to talk to them.
Thinking about conversion rate optimization, do you have any specific tactics or even anecdotes about what's worked well as far as manipulating what you write in the description for the app?
I mean, I'd say the description is one of the least important elements on the App Store page. It's, people are attracted to bright, shiny things. Having screenshots that are compelling, it's a lot easier to digest that than reading through like a whole paragraph of text. But best practices would state like having a really compelling 1 or 2 sentences above the fold that speak about like the social validation. Like we have 100,000 users that use this app daily to do this. So having like social validation, really echoing the value proposition of your product clearly in that first 2 sentences would probably be the best way to optimize your description.
Take a few more here.
So obviously in the Apple App Store, you have much more latitude to target multiple keywords if you want, or permutations of keywords since you have a larger character count for the title. So we have like a lot of internal discussions on, like we have like one real primary target keyword that we're searching for, like one of our apps. And there's a lot of people who think like, oh, it's better if we like have like, we target one main keyword and it's like succinct. And both of these keywords are in like striking distance. They're not unrealistic keywords. Have you guys had more success with choosing one word and like really doubling down as far as like your ASO keyword, or targeting multiple permutations of keywords knowing that it's going to be truncated?
I would go with the multiple permutations in general. Yeah. Then if you have one keyword that is really, really important, someone has done that. I mean, I don't know what your app is, but putting it on the developer name will also help quite a bit, which is interesting. I mean, for us, Sonic gets quite a lot of downloads, and there's this developer who has Sonic on their name and Sonic on their developer name, and they're ranking higher than us, which is crazy if you think about it, just because they have it both sides. So I recommend doing that.
Are you referring to the Apple App Store?
Apple App Store, yes, only. Google Play does not allow latitude there.
So I don't think adding more keywords to your title, I forget which company did an analysis of like, are longer titles, like are keywords in longer titles penalized because the title's longer? And I don't think they found any, like there's no penalty for having a 254 character title on iOS. Each keyword's going to be weighted very heavily.
On the flip side of that, if you do put in non-coherent keywords, then the App Store will penalize you by denying your app being published to a certain extent. But I would say multiple like keywords are important in there for ranking and for search.
I also think there's like a brand integrity question involved. I noticed that I think Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Snapchat, I'm not sure if it's true of Snapchat, but most of them don't have any like colon anything. It's just the brand name. And so it's a little bit of a stuffing your keyword with something, stuffing your title with something that might appear spammy can sometimes be just kind of like cheap and not good for your brand awareness.
Yeah, and I think sort of playing off that, it also depends on what your app is. Like for games, I think multiple keywords definitely helps because people search for types of games or maybe a competitor of games. For Uber or for Reddit, it may not make sense because they're well-known brands and they've established brands as themselves versus the name of the game.
I think you're keeping a couple different things in consideration. One is search discoverability, which can be also a pride thing too. While you don't want to dilute your brand image with having like a 100-character title, not ranking #1 for taxi kind of sucks. So there's a certain amount of, for these very, very relevant keywords to your product, you want to rank highly for those. So there's that balance between all those different things you want to weigh.
Yeah, in our case, we went with a colon something, and our colon something is the official app because we have a third-party ecosystem of Reddit clients, which in many cases have a lot more downloads than ours because they've been around for a long time. And so it was important to us that when someone searched in Reddit, that it was clear which one was like the one created by Reddit and not an independent developer who may have created an app a while back.
And another point here too is that Uber is really well known in the United States, but not necessarily worldwide. So that title can bring awareness to not only, here's Uber, but this, what is Uber? So we can help define that in regions that don't know Uber as well.
I guess I'll have one more up here.
Yeah, I have 2 questions, if that's allowed. The first one is, you all mentioned that there are different strategies for indie developers and then big developers. At what point does the strategy start to change? Like, what is the tipping point? And what's the metric that you would use to define that?
It's kind of like, it's like, when do you know you've hit product market fit? Kind of know. I would say like you've seen exponential growth. You probably just raised a really awesome Series A round. I think after you raise like a Series A and you're having like really exponential growth and your user base moves beyond the hundreds of thousands to millions, I think you'll know.
Yeah, I think it's number of downloads would be the key metric for us, especially if you're talking about ASO. That's the number that matters the most.
Yeah, I think, and it's a bit of the install thing is obviously a force multiplier because that's how you get the attention of app stores as well, and then you get the featuring, and then you get the fancy app store page, and then all these things sort of compound, and sometimes that happens for indie developers. Sometimes they just get lucky, like 2 guys in a garage make a game, it ends up #1 in the free charts, and then it propels itself into ubiquity. But I don't know that you can reverse engineer that.
Thank you. The second question is specifically about Uber, but if you're a marketplace that only exists in certain cities, how do you handle that local aspect in your app store strategy?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's really tough because we only have localizations based on language. So if that language covers some cities where we're not available in, like on Uber Eats, you'll see in the description, we talk about the cities. We mention the cities that Uber Eats is available in. That way we can help mitigate some really bad user experience problems where users install the app and it's not available in that city. If you look at the reviews on Uber Eats, you'll still see, though, that people install the app despite it not being available in their city, and they're not happy about it. Yeah, if you read enough ratings or if you read enough reviews, there's a lot of positive, but a lot of people go to the App Store page and write a review to voice their frustrations.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we are going to close the Q&A. We invite you all to stay, hang out, mingle. We have champagne in the back. Last I checked, the Warriors are up by 20, so no need to rush home. But yeah.
Cafe.
Yeah, sounds like it's out there as well. We're also going to be having another one of these in July, so stay tuned for that. Probably be a slightly different focus, but we hope to see you guys there. Thank you all for coming out, and we'll see you next time.